In today's episode, we are joined by international sound healers, award-winning authors, composers, and musicians, Jonathan and Andi Goldman. Join us as they explain the two different ways that sound can heal, discuss the relevance of their formula frequency plus intent equals healing, and why the humming effect can be such an incredibly powerful tool to heal. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our show. Thank you for joining us as we continue on with our series again with energy, frequency, vibration, magnetics, the next era of healthcare. And in today's episode, we bring back internationally recognized sound healers Jonathan and his wife, Andi Goldman. This was a really fun conversation, and we dove into everything around how sound can actually heal. We talk about what the most powerful instrument is to heal your body. And we get into the formula that Jonathan literally created about 40 years ago. And it was frequency plus intent equals healing. He literally had a download message where that just made sense to him. And then he started on the pathway of really trying to understand that and researching it in great depth. And most of their books tie that concept back into it. And what exactly he means by frequency plus intent equals healing. A really powerful formula. Some of the other things that we talk about, we learn how to supercharge your intent. So if intent is really important for healing, then we need to know how to do it properly and how to really powerhouse it and supercharge it so we get the most out of it. We also talk about the concept of everybody being a unique vibrational being, that we all vibrate at something slightly different. And this is why everybody will have certain things that resonate with them and that actually make their body strong. And other people will resonate with something else that will make their body strong. And something that might make one body strong may make the other person weak. And so this is a really important concept to talk about, particularly at this point in time and what's going on in our world. I think this fundamental truth is something that we all need to pay attention to. We also, outside of just sound, Jonathan and Andi talk about the importance of silence and how silence itself has an immense amount of power to it, and that we need to actually incorporate very specific periods of silence in order to integrate a lot of the other information that we've received from sound. We get into lots of different things. This is a fun conversation. And like Taya said, this series is kind of rounded out in the four corners by these really amazing couples that have come in to share their insight. And it's a really fun conversation, to be able to talk to both, as Taya said, the male and the female energy and how it intertwines together to round this conversation out. So thanks so much for being here. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I also want to thank our sponsors, C60 and Ascent Nutrition. Now, C60, that incredibly powerful antioxidant, probably the world's most powerful antioxidant that we know of. And you only need to take about 1 teaspoon a day. And you can even start at a lower dose and to gradually titrate up. Now, you can go higher than that if you need to. Some people will go up to 2 teaspoons a day, but a lot of times 1 teaspoon is all you need. And the other thing that's really important to know is that you can also use it topically. So if you've got any wrinkles coming in around the eyes or on the skin, or if you've got any sun damaged areas on the skin, you can actually put a little drop on your finger and actually rub it right into those areas on the skin. And it is one of the top products for anti-aging, I think, that's out there. So if you haven't had a chance to check out C60, click the link below. That'll take you to their website. Use the promo code DRLOKEN and you'll get 15% off your order. For Ascent Nutrition, go check out their website below. I'll put the link there. You can use the promo code DRLOKEN. And again, you'll get 10% off your order. They have an array of amazing products. And one of the things right now that I'd like to bring attention to is, given that we are in fall, moving towards winter, this is when everybody's vitamin D levels start to plummet. We know that vitamin D is incredibly important for an array of different health benefits, including immune system. And this is one of the reasons why people suspect that also they're more prone to getting colds and flus and all of those sorts of things when we get into fall and winter. I implore everybody to go and get your vitamin D levels checked. Ask your doctor to run your 25 hydroxy vitamin D levels, and then make sure that you are in your optimal zone. There is a big difference between normal and optimal reference ranges. If you don't know what the optimal reference ranges are, go to my website, drjasonloken.com, and download the free ebook, The Top 10 Lab Tests. It's a free ebook. It's something I compiled where I looked at some of the big tests for different nutrient markers and whatnot that I think are really important for people's overall health. And it tells you the difference between a normal range versus where healthy zones should be. Vitamin D is very key that way. You don't get all of the benefits of vitamin D until you get into a certain range. And so you want to make sure you're in that range. And then to bring it up, if you can get sunlight, that is the best way. But the problem, remember, is that in North America, the UVB rays do not penetrate close enough to the Earth's surface when we start to get into fall and winter. So you will never make enough vitamin D from the sun alone in winter. So essentially, if we live in North America, you need to supplement with a vitamin D in order to maintain optimal levels throughout the winter. Now, I suggest check out Ascent Nutrition because they have a D3 plus K2. A lot of people do not know this. D3 needs to be, D3 is just another version of vitamin D. Pretty much all vitamin D supplements are D3 at this point because that's the form that you want it in. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you can't just take D3 by itself. It has to be combined with K2. A lot of these nutrients are synergistic. They need to be blended together. So D3 plus K2. Also, you should be aware of taking magnesium and a little bit of vitamin A. All of those are beneficial and synergistic to vitamin D working properly. Now, the product from Ascent Nutrition, their vitamin D3 and K2 has a really excellent amount of D3 and K2. Each tablet is 2,000 IUs, and it also has K2 in the most bioactive form, which is called the menaquinone 7 or MK7 form for K2. And you get about 75 micrograms per tablet with that. So check them out. That would be the product I would recommend at this point in time. And load up, get your vitamin D levels up, get your blood levels checked so you know exactly where you're at and when you get into your optimal zone. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoy the show and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast as we continue on with our series on energy, frequency, vibration, magnetics, the next era of healthcare. And we are so excited to have duo team, Jonathan and Andi Goldman. And Jonathan is an international authority and pioneer in the field of sound healing. He's a renowned writer, musician, and teacher. Jonathan is the author of several books, including The Divine Name, the 2011 Visionary Award for Best Alternative Book of the Year, and The 7 Secrets of Sound Healing. A Grammy nominee, his award-winning recordings include Chakra Chants and The Divine Name. He is the founder and director of the Sound Healers Association and CEO of Spirit Music. In spring 2011, Jonathan Goldman was named one of Watkins' Mind, Body, Spirit magazine's 100 most spiritually influential living people. Andi is a licensed psychotherapist specializing in holistic counseling and sound therapy. She is the director of the Healing Sound Seminars and co-director of the Sound Healers Association. She's a musician, teacher, sound healer, award-winning author, and the wife and partner of Jonathan Goldman. Together, they have co-authored Chakra Frequencies, winner of the Visionary Award for Best Alternative Health Book of the Year, and their new best-selling, The Humming Effect, which won the 2018 Gold Visionary Award for Best Health in Healing Book. Together, Jonathan and Andi have dedicated their lives to the path of service, helping awaken and empower others with the ability of sound to heal and transform. Guys, what an absolute honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you very much for that beautiful, beautiful introduction. And we are delighted to be here.
It is lovely to be here, and we look forward to sharing some of what we perceive of as being really important knowledge, information, techniques, and energy with regard to how to use all sorts of vibrational tools, because everything is vibration, to enhance our consciousness and our health. So thank you.
Well, I honestly don't think we would have rounded this series out properly if we didn't have you guys on it, because when I first came across your work, I think I was saying before to you that the first book that I came across when I was reading it was The 7 Secrets of Sound Healing. And then that was really like a good introduction to then dive into a lot of the other work that you guys have done. But you know, running through it, I was so excited to come across your work because I really feel like you guys are such avatars in bridging this world of science and spirituality and traditional wisdom and just bringing so much more awareness to the healing power of sound. So thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. And, just any way that we can be of service, and bringing sound is such a beautiful, beautiful modality for people to work with, to help them to deal with their lives and bring in that balance. And yeah. So,
It's been our assignment, if you like, and what
yeah.
a blessing. I mean, how cool is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just-
well, and such a, I mean, there's so much tradition to sound too. I mean, it's been used for so long, and I mean, it's got such a I mean, everything from celebration to healing. I mean, sound plays a role in almost everything. So to be able to connect that tradition and apply it through what we know now through some of the science and some of the studies on that, we can really understand its benefits in a much more broad capacity.
Well, Jason, the ancient mystics and our quantum physicists are in agreement. Everything is in a state of vibration. In the beginning was the Word, and the Lord said, let there be light, the act of speaking, creating luminosity. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, tool. And it's been really a great honor to help reawaken people to this thing that's been here all the time. But by gosh and by golly, around 79, I'm playing in a rock and roll band in a club without the foggiest notion of this. And then I have this experience. And the experience basically is looking out into the audience and seeing that there's an ambiance of negativity and violence, and all of a sudden realizing the music that I was creating at the time was helping induce this, and having the thought, can music be used to make people feel better? And that thought shifting 10, 15 degrees ago, I wonder if sound can be used to heal. And from there, doors just opened, and it's been a magnificent path. And it's so gratifying that now, 40 plus years later, sound is really taking on the, if you like, level of consciousness that I've been looking for decades.
Well, I think that the information that you guys provide and the tools and the techniques are actually incredibly valuable. They always have been, but I think right at this particular point in time, I think that they can be a really, really, really important asset to helping people at this point.
Well, we certainly feel that very strongly. And and it's interesting because Jonathan was talking about, having this awareness, and that was back in 1979. And Jonathan and I started working together about 25 years ago. So as a background, my background is as a psychotherapist, but I really utilized expressive therapies, and sound is probably the most expressive therapy that everyone is capable of utilizing with their voice. And so our work has been really using the voice to shift and change our consciousness, and to shift and change, those, bringing the balance into our lives through our voice. And so you don't have to be a musician, you don't have to be a singer. If you have a voice, you can work with sound as a healing modality.
I love it. It's one of the most accessible things for people. And it also ties back that we have the ability to heal ourselves. I think whenever we have a message that comes back that empowers us in that way, I feel like this has been a part of a message that's come through in many different ways from different speakers, but around the idea again of sort of this self-authority and this sovereignty. And it's like this idea of being able to come back that we do actually have a lot of information innately inside of it. I would say we have all the information. We just need to be able to remember it or unlock it. And I feel like sound can be one of the really important pieces that can assist us in doing that. So maybe we can jump in with, we've talked about it a little bit, but can we break down, like, how does sound actually heal? I mean, what are some of the main principles of sound healing? What do people need to know?
Okay, first basic idea is that everything is in a state of vibration. From the electrons moving around the nucleus of an atom to planets, distant galaxies moving around their suns. They're all in motion. If they're in motion, they're conceptually creating a vibration. This includes our body. Every organ, every bone, every tissue, every system, every part of the body is in a state of normal, healthy resonance. In fact, when we're feeling good, we say we're in sound health. But if you like, so we're like this wonderful orchestra that's playing the overall symphony of the self. But what happens if the second violin player loses their sheet music? They begin to play out of tune, out of harmony. Pretty soon, the entire string section sounds off, and pretty soon, the entire orchestra will sound off. And this is akin to a part of our body vibrating with the wrong frequency, or frequencies being, not encoded in a state of health and, balance. And we say that this part of the body is vibrating out of ease or out of harmony, and that is dis-ease. So the very concept of dis-ease is this vibration that is out of kilter with everything else. And the simplest idea of using sound for healing is simply to restore the sheet music back to this player. And bottom line, and humans love toys, and here I've got these tuning forks here, and we've got a Tibetan bowl here, and we've got all sorts of instruments and all this other stuff. But the best, most wonderful healing instrument that we know about doesn't require electricity, doesn't require batteries. The owner's manual is easy to use, and everyone's got one, and it is the voice.
The voice. And of course, working with the voice it's interesting because you mentioned our recent book, The Humming Effect. And after working with so many different sounds and mantras and, exercises to work with the voice, we wanted to come up with something that everybody would be able to do and incorporate, a sound that was just so comfortable and easy and familiar. And that was what guided us to humming. But that, of course, is, a whole other piece here. But I just wanted to mention that, with our voice, and I love what you said earlier, Jason, that it is empowering. And that, to me, is one of the biggest assets of working with your own voice and sound. You have the capacity within yourself to shift and change your consciousness through your sound. And that is so empowering. And, you don't have to go anywhere but within.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. We have, for example, wonderful crystal bowls that make these great sounds and this and that. But what if you're walking and, you're not near a bowl, or you're not near electricity or something like that? Can you learn to use your voice? When you wake up somewhere, you've always got your voice. And then in particular, we, as Andy said, we've taught so many different things, from mantras to overtone chanting to whatnot, really, really powerful stuff. But we wanted to find a sound that was all inclusive, that somebody didn't feel like they had to be a trained vocalist, a trained singer, a trained instrumentalist, or have expensive equipment, or something that everybody could use. And the most inclusive sound that we encountered, we looked at each other one day and said, what's a sound that everybody,
and we just went, we just went, we've got to do something with the hum for sure.
So it was an amazing phenomenon on that one. Your question about principles of using sound for healing, or for vibration for healing. Where do we begin? Andy, where would you begin?
Oh, well, you started in a good place with talking about how we, we're out of harmony in our bodies. There's the disease, and, everything is frequency. But I also want to jump in with a formula that Jonathan created, honestly, a long time ago. And it is frequency plus intent equals healing. So when we are working with sound, when we're working with the sounds that we are making, that's the frequency, and the intention that we put onto that sound, that coupled with the frequency, that is what brings in the healing. And so I do want to mention frequency plus intent equals healing. And of course, Jonathan has a great story about how he came up with that formula a long time ago.
Oh, yes. Wow. It was so long ago that the computer was using a DOS operating system. So imagine a sort of really dark screen with amber letters. That were the old computers. And I basically was trying to put together all this information that I had amassed. I have a master's degree from Lesley University, actually researching the uses of sound and music for healing. And I had probably papers that were stacked this high with different systems that use sound for healing. And there would be spiritual master A that would use a particular mantra for a particular chakra, and spiritual master B who'd use a completely different mantra for that same chakra. Or Dr. X is using a frequency for an organ, Dr. Y who is using a completely different set of frequencies for the same organ. And I was going, oh my gosh, because Jason, I come from a family of doctors, father, grandfather, brother, all medical doctors. And I had a really highly developed left brain. I thought I was going to be the person to come up with the coherent set of frequencies for everything. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. And I was really in a state of intellectual angst. I'm rocking back and forth with my head and my hands in front of this computer going, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And I hear this inner voice. And the inner voice says that it's not only the frequency of the sound that creates its effect. It is also the intention of the person making and receiving the sound. And it was like this light went on. I wrote on this, there were literally amber or gold letters on this black screen. It said frequency plus intent equals healing. Frequency being the vibration, the sound, if you like, intention being the consciousness that is encoded on the sound. And healing was the outcome that I desired, but you could have all sorts of different things. Another subcorollary I have is vocalization plus visualization equals manifestation. But this can go on and on. Sound plus belief equals outcome, but it is so important. I think now as we are beginning to really understand the aspects of different vibrations, how important it is to project our consciousness, and our consciousness coupled with the sound is really the key for this whole phenomena of realignment of vibrations and quantum manifestation.
So much to get into on that. It's what I really appreciated about your work was that you really built in the concepts that have come about with quantum physics and kind of tied it into your work. And to me, it's like that's what makes really healing really exciting. Other than that, I think healing can kind of get sort of constricted and boring a little bit. And this sort of adds a whole lot of other dynamics that make things a lot more exciting and fun. And around intent, I mean, there's been lots of literature on intent. I mean, we interviewed Lynn McTaggart a while back. I mean, she's a guru in intent, has done lots of...
She uses our music. Yeah, it's great.
She's wonderful. And she's brought a lot of awareness to that as well. And gosh, where do I want to go with intent? Because it's like, there's so much. There's a few questions I want to get into down the road here around how do we really supercharge our intent? Because I think just randomly thinking about something versus how do we really fuel that up is important, because that can basically be the difference between whether we manifest something or we don't.
This is also how even with Huna Flash, so this Lemurian shaman with whom we've become friends with and we're studying more extensively with, he speaks of even the way in which he performs ceremony or prayer, he's incorporating or healing our planet or accessing portals and that sort of thing. His approach, as we've kind of witnessed, is also the intention is of utmost importance before the ceremony has even begun. It's getting very clear on the intention of what it is that you're wanting to bring forth, what it is that you're wanting to dream into being. So I think it's really interesting, even as you're talking about healing the body or healing oneself, whether it be healing the body and healing oneself or healing our communities, healing our planet, it goes back to intention and frequency.
Well, and a lot of times I think even traditionally with shamans, that was a big part of it. So the intent was almost like they would, I think the belief was kind of that the intent would then be the first part, and then the spoken word or the sound was the vehicle that drove the intent into, I mean, that could have been into the ley lines of the planet, that could have been into the embody. I mean, I think of it even as the DNA at this point, and we get certain activations that could be playing into it. I mean, I think all of that is possible, but the idea that sound can be the vehicle for the light, you know, for the information in some capacity, that I find that really exciting. And it seems so almost commonsensical that these two concepts would actually work together.
Just real quick, when I first came up with the frequency plus intent, or vocalization equals visualization, I said, oh God, this is great. I thought, what an original concept. No, because if you examine the different spiritual, shamanic, magical traditions, they have always had, even if you like, the word abracadabra is actually an ancient Aramaic word, which means I will create as I make sound. It, and it got then, shall we say, nullified through the intention of laughter and whatnot. Isn't it silly? But it used to be a magical term, and probably with good reason. Just want to shift for a moment back 40 years. So I have this awareness of the importance of intention, whatnot. And I'm talking to these different scientists, doctors, 40 years ago, and they looked at me like I was from another galaxy. And they're like, oh yeah, right. And I mean, it was really crazy. And blessed be to people like Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Lynn, all these people who are now really focusing on the power of them, whether it's the placebo or belief or whatnot, the power of our consciousness to really affect and co-create reality.
And the power of our consciousness. So what we are holding in our consciousness is of the utmost importance. And, the positive, loving, healing vibrations of gratitude and appreciation. And when we're setting intentions, in enveloping our intentions with those frequencies. And it's reminding me very much of both Jonathan and I, our mentor, who became just our beloved mother of sound, and she's no longer on, the planet. She's definitely watching us probably right now, but her name was Sarah Benson, and she taught us the true sound of healing is love. And that is one of the most important things that we like to impart when we're teaching. And in fact, Jonathan's book, The 7 Secrets, was dedicated to Sarah. So the true sound of healing is love. And I think if we can hold that in our hearts, the intention of that is very powerful.
Andy was saying the power of gratitude and all this other stuff and love. And Jason, I'm going to jump for just a second. If you think about the fact that the prayers on our planet are vocalized, they're whispered, chanted, spoken, sung, but they're vocalized. That's because sound amplifies the power of prayer. So once again, they work together in an extraordinary manner, in a synergistic manner. That's 1 + 1 = 3. And one of the things that it's important to just be aware of is that even in our speech and in our conversation, in fact, I was so impressed when I first met Andy with her using as a sound as a psychotherapeutic tool. On the phone, she'd deal with clients and all that stuff. And that, wow, she really has the great gift of being able to listen and encode energy through sound and whatnot. And we want everyone to realize that whenever you even speak, your voice with your consciousness transmits energy. It doesn't have to be consciously healing sound, but even if you're talking in conversation, it's so important and powerful to be aware of that and try to be projecting loving appreciation and energy.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the books I wrote years back with a friend of mine was called Letters That Move the World, Intentional Acts of Gratitude. And the whole premise is to create a large movement where everybody is literally embracing that and then literally sending letters and opening them within a short period of time collectively to see if there can be a shift in consciousness on the planet.
Oh, beautiful.
It really is a beautiful process. And, when you talk about consciousness, this comes up lots. And I'll share my perspective on this that people have heard in the past too, but why I think it's so empowering. So something like love. I mean, love is such a powerful field because it's such an expansive field. So I think what's important to remember is that when you start to think about things from a quantum physics perspective, there literally is infinite possibilities, but those possibilities are going to be limited to the field that you are living in. And so if you are living in a very contracted field, you are only privy to a certain number of those infinite possibilities. When you shift into expansive fields like love and appreciation, which are huge, all of a sudden new possibilities that you just did not see, either they were there and you couldn't see them, or they just weren't even available to you, all of a sudden start to make themselves available to you. So the potential for healing to occur in such an expansive field, it's almost unfathomable until you actually experience what the potential could be like.
Yes.
I thought you wanted to say something.
No.
I mean, that was so beautifully said, Jason, because it is so much of how we embrace sound healing and of course, just holding appreciation and gratitude. And I know that Heart Math has done so much with that and, getting our bodies, minds, and spirits, in the frequency of appreciation and love. And then when we put our sound
Right.
onto that, wow, the possibilities.
Sound as if you like the cherry on the ice cream. But yeah, you work simply with the energy of nice deep breaths, thinking, being appreciative, and then you add the sound, which is being encoded in your, electromagnetic field is so much greater. And, it's, to the degree that once a year we do an event
I was just going to talk about
called World Sound Healing Day,
Yeah.
where we have people throughout the planet making intentionalized sound with the idea that we can somehow collectively interface with what I call the Gaia Matrix, the energetic field of our planet. They've done some, if you like, work with the Global Consciousness Project and whatnot to validate that this stuff is going on. But I think that we're actually just, in terms of, we were mentioning this a little bit before, but in terms of being able to do the research, quote, the peer review, I think sometimes the instrumentation simply has not been developed that can measure such sensitive shifts in the vibratory field.
I could not agree with you more. I think that it's personally why I think if you're going to limit yourself to what's currently available, I mean, take the science for what the science is. It's always a good stepping stone, but almost all the time, science eventually gets debunked with new science. So,
Always.
I mean, we were convinced for a long time that, the world was flat, and we were convinced that certain medications did no harm. I mean, things gradually change over time with more information and more sophistication. So I definitely like when we get inspired. To me, always feels like something that we need to follow, whatever that means. And then let's look into that and let's kind of explore it, even if we don't know how to validate it exactly yet.
Jason, I'm going to jump in because I just remembered an important aspect from our perspective of using sound for healing. We've got a couple more that we want to throw in and have conversation, but it's the idea that we are all unique vibratory beings. And, you were talking about medicines not having certain, the effect. And whenever we would begin a workshop, I'd say, okay, how many of you are allergic to penicillin? And anywhere from 5 to 20% of an audience would raise their hand, including Andy. And I'd say, okay, for 80% of you, or even 95, penicillin is a healing frequency or set of frequencies, but for 5 to 20%, it's toxic. We need to really understand and acknowledge that. And because there's a lot of nonsense about certain things being good for everybody. I have not yet encountered anything that works for everyone. I don't know, maybe breathing, but even that.
Maybe love.
Maybe love
yeah,
and
all right, there you
breathing.
go.
But you know what? I'm really, really glad that you brought that up, because it's another one of the things. I mean, this is a foundational principle. I mean, I'm a naturopathic doctor and an osteopath, and I blend these worlds, and it's like a foundational piece of being a naturopathic doctor. well, at least it's supposed to be, is that there is an individualized treatment. No person needs exactly the same treatment. That's not how we treat. That's not how we assess. And so the idea is across the board that there's a specific logarithm to things, or there's one treatment for every individual, just doesn't happen. I mean, it just really is not, it's not a reality. And you actually see when you're a clinician, you work firsthand with people, you see where that doesn't work. And you always have a certain percentage of the population that even if a certain group does okay with something, there's always going to be a certain group that won't, and another percentage that will actually do very badly with it. So it's when you talked about this and when you brought in the unique vibratory being, I really love that, because I also got that you understood the importance of individuality and to honor that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we make sure that when we are teaching or we are imparting information about sound, it isn't one sound that is going to be the be all to end all for everyone. And also, you know, along those same lines, it's like when we are making sound, whether we're, you know, making it with our own voice, whether we're listening to sound, we're all going to be affected in a very unique way. And that unique way is okay, you know, and that if one can hold that, you can take away the judgmental aspect of, oh, I can't make those sounds because my voice is such and such. No, it's like all the sounds, it's unique unto you, and that is okay.
You know, one of the areas I started to experiment with sound healing in clinical practices, when I would be working with people osteopathically. So osteopathically, you've got your hands on people and you're working with really a lot of different layers of tissue, whether it's viscera or fascia or the musculoskeletal system, whichever. And I remember when I first started working with patients, and you'd be working with the viscera, so very gentle touch, but your intent is also tied into where you're working with. And you can feel where there's blockages in different areas. You can feel where there's blockages throughout, like even the different meridians from a Chinese medicine perspective and whatnot. And I remember at one point, I just knew that the person had to started to have to make certain sounds. And I asked them to just start making sounds. And because I had my hands on the area, I actually had it on the liver at the time. And I actually was asking them to make certain sounds to see when both they felt in that area and when I felt it in my hands that something was shifting. And it was really, really profound. I mean, it actually opened up into a big emotional release, which usually happens at times when there's big, profound healing that's taking place and when things just kind of dissolve and give way. But it was, and then it became a part that I would incorporate at different times with people, because it was a really beautiful way to get them into their body and to actually, you know, most people don't sit to actually feel where these different things are and to actually feel how sound can really move around into different areas of the body. But my point around that was that no individual had exactly the same sound as somebody else for different areas of their body. There may have been a tendency towards maybe lower tones and then moving into higher sort of tones, or pitches might change. But what have you guys found from that perspective?
Totally exactly what you said. And how cool is it if you can learn? See, I think there's a natural resonance that occurs, but also that we can learn to enhance that resonance with our consciousness. So, you know, we're going to get back to toning and particularly humming, because, you know, I can make a sound right now, and this is going to be pretty interesting. I'm going to make a sound. I'm going to bring it from here to here, and I'm going to try not to shift the tonality too much, but just do it with my, if you like, consciousness, and you'll see. So I went, and because I've been doing this a long time. But once again, if, you know, through working with our own self-created sounds, particularly the hum, we really empower ourselves to do exactly what you're talking about. And if you can feel it, then it's real for you. And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. And working with sound, there are so many physiological things that are happening when we're using our voice, working with sound. Our blood pressure is lowered, our heart rate is lowered, different hormones are released, such as melatonin. We're humming and melatonin is, released. It's, helpful when you're trying to fall asleep to hum. And also, one of the things that's been really really a joy for us when we've been doing workshops is that, we are in, a big circle or whatever, and, everyone is toning in some capacity, whatever the exercise that we're doing. But there is a deep connection that people feel. They feel connected to the other people in the group and more of a connection. What's happening is that oxytocin is being emitted as we are sounding. So there's all of these physiological benefits. And of course, there's nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, and
that is being released. And what's really interesting is that they've been finding for a while now that humming particularly causes the release of nitric oxide, which can be used as an antiviral agent. So it can be used for all sorts of different, shall we say, imbalances, including, for example, sinusitis and other things. So it's quite interesting and quite exciting. When we make sound together too, I was just thinking there is an entrainment phenomena, a vibrational, electromagnetic nervous system phenomena where two people will begin to vibrate together. We have a book that we did a while ago called Chakra Frequencies, but where we, if you like, give certain techniques for if you're not necessarily getting along real well together. And,
which does happen.
Which does happen, even,
to the best of us.
And the idea is you want to use your voice, but you don't necessarily want to use it in a positive level. You might want to go, you so-and-so. Instead, we say, you need to just take a breath and do a sound together, whether it's an om, an ah, or whatnot. And within a minute or two that, you pull up in front of a party. I'm not going in there. I'm not going in there. You make sound. A couple of minutes later, you look at each other and go, honey, I love you.
And of course, the trick, the important piece in all of that is that as a couple or as a friend or whatever, you need to make that sort of that contract, that verbal contract way when you're not in that place, so that you can say, okay, when we get to that really difficult place, one of us will have the wherewithal to say, let's make a sound, let's just start oming, let's start toning in some capacity. And so if you have that sort of, on the table ahead of time, then when you are in that position, you're getting ready to go into a party and it's like, honey, we got to ohm here. Om. And the energy really, it's been our experience that the energy really shifts very, very quickly. So
what's really interesting is a friend of mine just recently passed along a video of a group of people getting together. So it might have been a peace rally, and I believe it was in France, and they just came together and they ohmed in harmony. And I tell you, I've watched this video probably 3 times, and every time I do, it gives me goosebumps and makes me teary-eyed. It's so powerful. And when you were speaking of doing it as a couple, I feel like let's do this on a global level. It's so needed right now.
We need to have a world toning to get everybody kind of in sync. When we played with this with our kids, when they have a bit of we've got a 4 and a 5-year-old, so.
Actually, we did this an hour ago.
I'm not joking. We did this before we actually came on to talk to you guys because all hell was breaking loose for a bit. So we were doing a little bit of yoga poses and adding some humming into it
and shaking.
Yeah, we were pulling out all the tools. So and
how beautiful!
They love it.
How very
they have fun with it for sure. And it sometimes just shifts the context too, and it gets them in their body, right? Gets them back in their body. Well, and on another point, we did gosh, probably like 3 years ago now, a workshop with Dr. Peter Levine, and he's the
Trauma expert, one of the leading trauma experts. He is somatic
somatic
experiencing.
experiencing. That's the name of it. And so he would actually incorporate a sound like "voo," and he would say "voo," and he'd sit right down because you kind of you'd feel it at the certain place when you'd play with the tone. You'd get it down here, and it was actually a really powerful way to stimulate the vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve then, because it's got both sensory and motor function, that sensory function pulls up and then tells the brain that things are okay and helps you get back into parasympathetic dominance. So he uses that with a lot of his trauma therapy, with a lot of trauma therapy now.
You know, it's a great sound. Once again, there are a number of different sounds, and yeah, the good old vagus nerve. It's interesting because, you know, there seem to be only two ways that we can consciously shift that, and one of them is through breath, and one of them is through, well, they say humming, but the voo will do it, or any sort of like tone. There's like an extended, you know, elongate. Real quick, there are two ways
yeah, you're
that
reading my
sound,
mind.
right, that sound affects us. The first is called psycho-acoustics. That's where the sound goes into the ear, into our brain, and it affects our nervous system, our heart rate, our blood pressure, our respiration. And it's great whenever we listen to music or even our voice. But the second way is called vibro acoustics. And this is where sound goes into you on a cellular level, affecting you down to a DNA and even a molecular level, atomic level. And this is very, very powerful. It's going to, you know, we work with it all the time, but it's going to be getting more and more, if you like, encoded into the scientific community, because it may be where a lot of the juice is occurring in terms of the effects of vibration, not only how it affects our brain, but how the stuff affects us on a cellular level. And it seems that the most powerful vibroacoustic sound we can make is the hum. Now, here's one. I mean, we're going to play for a second with you. You ready? Want you to just, and the only caveat for, oh, there are two caveats for when you hum. One is to do it in a comfortable voice. But the other is you have to have your lips closed. If your lips are open, it's not a hum. I want you to just try something. Make a hum and then pinch your nose.
Yeah, shuts it right down.
You can't hum. And, you know, speaking of vibroacoustics, where the sound goes right into our bodies, and that humming is really what we found in our research and our experience, is that it really is one of the most powerful ways to encode vibroacoustically the sound. And what is really neat is that when we're humming, it's like we're giving ourselves an internal massage, and we can actually, with our intention, guide that hum to different parts of our body. And so you can affect, you know, the whole person really through something as simple as humming. So,
and you know, everybody, kids hum, the elderly hum. My first, you know, real awareness of this was about 25, 30 years ago or more, at a Hollywood party that was being given for me and for a fellow named Dr. John Lilly. You know, he was basically the fellow that they did Day of the Dolphin and also Altered States on, and he was sitting there with me, and he's going, and he's humming for a while. We're like off by ourselves, and Lanai trying to get away from the energy of the party. We were both, you know, teaching that weekend, and finally I turned to him. I said, John, because I knew that he was a voyager in time and space. I said, are you doing that consciously? That was a mistake, because you don't ask a man who's written tons of books about consciousness. And he looks at me and goes, young man, because he was probably 80 at the time, said, I no longer know what consciousness is. And he goes into a half-hour rap about all X, Y, Z. So he never actually gave me an answer, but I knew that he had actually discovered something profound about shifting his vibrational field naturally through a recurring hum.
Mm.
That's beautiful. You know, my dad hums all the time.
I
And
was just going to say that.
yeah,
Mhm.
he's always humming, and I think it's probably just an adaptive way that he's figured out, like, to self-regulate, probably. You
Yeah.
know, just
We
to
Right.
kind
hum
of
and
keep
we're
the
happy.
nervous system going. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
we hum, and we actually, in our book, we call it conscious humming, because we have, different ways of, definitely focusing on your breathing and really relaxing your body through your breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing, and then allowing the humming to start. And so we call it conscious humming. And it just, when we started doing our research, even though we had done a lot of empirical research, obviously we hummed a lot with, in our workshops and so forth, but we really delved into a lot of scientific information. And there is a great deal of peer-reviewed information on humming and what can happen. And, we were talking about it earlier, the different physiological aspects of humming, but it is a very important and very powerful tool for self-regulating. And of course, one of the things that we found is that with particularly the current state of our world, there's a lot of extra stress happening right now. And so people have that ability just through humming to empower themselves to lessen that stress for themselves. And so we like that.
Totally. And once again, putting the intention
Mhm.
onto the sound and onto the hum is so great, because once you learn, most people can feel comfortable doing their own hum. And we usually ask people first to hum for a couple of minutes, but consciously humming, and all of a sudden their lives are shifted and changed, because an entire world of new possibilities becomes open to them. Because it's a really, we say the hum is a gateway sound, because it opens up people to all sorts of other aspects of using sound. And, after having been in this field extensively for 40 years, I've sort of returned to the hum as my primary sound. And I have to tell you both that two things about the hum. First of all, this comes from the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali's. Sutra 1.27, this is Swami Satchidananda, who is the Indian guru who opened up Woodstock, and we would often teach at his ashram. But Swami Satchidananda basically did a translation and basically says, was Sutra 1.27, that the original sound of creation was pranava, the humming of prana. They had to give it a name, so they called it Om.
So humming, beginning those sounds. So
Yeah, I love it. I think that's really beautiful.
Mhm.
And
And-
I mean, Taya's been a yoga instructor for decades,
Yeah.
and teaches meditation and whatnot. And I mean, a lot of times at the end of practice, when you get everybody oming, it's emotional.
Powerful. It's I remember, there's been a few occasions, typically the morning classes. I feel like when people are still half asleep, not quite awake, when their ego hasn't quite kicked in gear yet, we would do the most powerful ones that we would do in class would be where we would start off oming simultaneously together, and then we would trail off into our own capacity to be able to hold the sound and stretch the exhalation breath, so it would waver. But then at the end, we would bring it all together with the chime and one collective om. And it's powerful. Like I know for me personally, when I've partaken in those classes or led any of those classes, regardless, it's just like almost this big sigh, this, oftentimes there would be tears. It's quite powerful. And to that, I've also noticed that even within my own journey, I mean, if we want to learn anything more extensively, then we teach. So my own practice of yoga, and in the 13 years that I've been teaching it, I've learned so much. And I've also learned exactly how little I know, because there's so much to learn constantly. But even with the bija sounds, so the seed sounds that we make to activate or connect with the different chakras throughout our energetic body. In our yoga practice, I have to review my notes here to remind myself because it's been a while, but it's Lam for the base and moving up the chakras, Vam, Ram, Yam, Hum, Om, and silence. What I learned within my own practice and within the classroom setting and within my own body is that I don't know if one particular chakra can even be activated with one particular sound. It's almost, that is also individual as well. So even when we speak of making sound, I would oftentimes in the past recent years go to, experiment with the sound. Just go into your own body and allow the sound vibration to take you within, and then just play with it, experiment with it, and make different sounds and feel it within your own body. Where are you feeling it? What are you connecting to? What emotions are coming up? But I love what you're saying with as far as humming just being the most effective. This is accessible to everybody. And it's essentially, it gets people within their physical body. Mm-hmm. And I feel like within our society, and specifically Western society, we're so head heavy. We're always in here, overthinking, intellectualizing, rationalizing, figuring out how to go from A to B, and just stuck up here. So to freely hum, and to land in the body. And through that process, you're extending the exhalation breath, you're calming the nervous system, you're landing in the here and now. It's such a powerful tool that everyone has access to.
Well, it's interesting because on our book, The Humming Effect, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who of course wrote Biology of Belief, and he's a dear friend, he gave us a beautiful quote. And you know what, I'm going to just read it. I was going to say it, but I don't know if I can remember the whole thing, so I'm going to just read it quickly here. He says, I highly recommend the humming effect for all those impacted by the stress of the modern world. It is a powerful, non-pharmaceutical prescription for self-healing, and has only positive side effects, such as health, harmony, and healing. And I love that quote because I love the part that he says it is a non-pharmaceutical approach. And, that once again, too, you don't have to take a pill. I mean, you can if you want to, but we're suggesting hum instead. And it's better, it's healthier, it's non-invasive. It will only bring positive effects. And so anyway, I wanted to read that.
And interesting regarding the bijas, which we love the bijas.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because it's related, if you like, a little bit, not a little bit, but to the, Vedic traditions and whatnot. And so there are people who will not do that because they think it's heathen. But nobody can put up any fuss about doing a hum. On a level, it's disguised as so many things. In the yoga tradition, there's Shabd yoga, which is, traveling on the sound current. And there's something called Brahmari Pranayama, which very simply is blocking your ears with a certain mudra, closing your eyes, and humming. And it's like considered one of the major, sonic tools for a transmission, including the potential, shall we say, benefit to people with Alzheimer's. Wow, how cool. With all sorts of trauma, how cool. So once again, we are not at all locked into it, but we're talking a lot about it now because it really has been catching on so much that we're so grateful. Because if you'd been like teaching really advanced sound work and it's just doing flybys with people, they're not getting it at all, and they get hum. Yeah. Wow, what a blessing!
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting in our workshops. We do vocal toning, the chakras and the bija mantras, and also we then will do humming exercises. And at the end of the workshop, we'll ask people what they experienced and how they felt, etc. And inevitably the humming exercise just was it. And we were delighted to hear that, just as we're doing our own research with everything. And so it is an easy, powerful, lovely way to self-empower with sound.
When you said how humming just made it accessible, it reminds me of literally like about 20 years ago when I had started practice, and I would talk to patients about meditation. And I remember one of my patients, she came up to me after and she said, just so you know, you've got a fairly large Christian community here that aren't going to really get meditation. So you might want to figure out a different way to say it. So then I just switched it to breathing techniques. And then that was fine. Almost the same thing. I get them to focus on something. I get them to feel their diaphragm. I get them to focus on their breath. And then that was totally acceptable. So it doesn't, I think it's just being able to pivot, it's like what's ultimately the goal is that you want people to find a tool that can be of assistance for them. And if you don't need to be attached to the tradition behind it or whatever it is, it's like, then just adapt it. I feel like right now we all need to be able to pivot quickly. So these are good times to be able to just practice something that might be of value, and you'll know because you'll feel it, right? Mm-hmm. Where I would like to actually pivot to then is, so we've been talking about a lot of stuff around sound. Can you tell us about the importance of silence, and specifically when you talk about the still point? Because it makes me think about conversation. A lot of times we don't like to have the lulls in conversation, but sometimes that's where all of the juice is in those moments of silence. So maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Well, I thank you for bringing up silence, because it is as important as as intention, as the frequency. Going into silence after you have been in sound, that is where the shifts and the changes really happen, is in that silence.
Well, we like to say that silence is the yin to the yang of sound. And I mean, it took me many years to discover this, because I was so enamored with sound and making sound that all of a sudden I had this revelatory experience one time where it is in the silence that the true, as Andy said, profound shifts and changes. If you're going now, then there's no room for the vibrational shift that you've created to encode itself on a cellular, molecular, and etheric level. So silence is so mandatory, and it is in the silence indeed that all things are possible.
Well, and it is in the silence where we begin to actually listen within. And I think that, bringing forth now the subject of silence, I just am so happy about that, because we are living in a culture that has such a difficult time being in silence. There's so much outer stimulation and so much, desire to, have, multitask and do all these things. And we forget that it is being in that silence. And when we've been in a sound exercise, a sound experience, like even if we were to hum, for 3 times, and, breathe and then hum and be in silence. Oh, it is such a gift.
And that's what people feel. There's oftentimes a bliss and a higher level that comes in, such as when you make Om. And once again, the Om and the hum are almost the same, but it's in the silence that you go. So everybody, if you're making any sort of sound, don't forget, make the sound a little while and then be almost an equal amount of time to be in the silence, because that's really allows you to go deep, deep, deep.
This is such an important part of it. And I can't help but remind me, in osteopathy again, because whenever I see correlations across different fields, I always feel like that now you're talking about truth, because these things are expansive across all fields. You can make these correlations. And in osteopathy, we will, hold on one sec, as it sounds like a
Party passing
by here for a moment. So. In osteopathy, essentially we are dialoguing with the body. So there's a
So we're just-
dialogue. There's a dialogue that's going on, and we're not doing anything. We are in a dialogue with the body. And eventually what happens is you're basically listening to the body and just sort of supporting it, creating more or less a space for a reorganization of the innate healing capacity to express itself. And what happens is at some point, you then encounter a still point. And what a still point is everything literally, I was just saying to Tay the other day, I said, it literally is like you end up in space. Everything goes quiet, completely quiet and still. But within that still point, it's quiet and still, but what happens is this is the rebooting of the system. Everything starts to happen. And then all of a sudden from the silence becomes this expansion that happens. And it literally feels like that in your hands, this sort of expansion of whatever the tissue, the fluid that you're feeling. And I can't help but think of how important that is, because from a broader perspective, you know, when everything was going on and all the craziness, I mean, we literally did a complete media shutdown. We did nothing. All we did was we spent time in nature. We would go for long walks. We are fortunate enough to be in Vancouver Island, where it was, you know, you're by the ocean, you're by the forest. So there's no TV, there's no nothing. And there was a different level of rebooting, I would say, that went on inside us at that time. You hear things in a different way. You can hear your own inner physician in a different way and with a different clarity, but you cannot really connect to it in the same way unless you have moments of silence. You know, you just have to have these different times. And, you know, even our guest, Dr. Amit Goswami, he would talk about this tradition that he uses, that he talks about from his quantum physics perspective, integrated medicine. He would say it's doobie, 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 do. You have to do, then you have to be. You have to do, then you have to be. And when you're be, everything has to slow down and there's quiet. And then you get the insights, the aha moments, and then you do. And then you have to come back. But it's this back and forth. And so I love that you had mentioned that in your book, because it's such an incredibly valuable part that I think has been sort of excluded as being not important, because we tend to think we have to be doing something all the time. And this is more the being, where I think the magic then happens, which then we put into our lives.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Thank you for the silence. And so
the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid, the waters of life.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. That's where you feel the expansion is in the CSF. So yeah.
And you know, you mentioned that you all had the beautiful opportunity to be on Vancouver Island and you're around nature. And, you know, there's something about that where you listen in such a different way. I know Jonathan and I have the fortune, we live in a beautiful area that we're about 10 minutes away from a gorgeous nature preserve, and we make it a point to go there every single day. And it is a time where we do go into that place of silence and that connection, and we hear and we listen and we get all of these great ideas and creative thoughts. But you know, it is in the silence that it comes.
So what a blessing to be reminded of that. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Question for you both. How can sound be used for planetary healing at this time?
Beautiful. And you know, we had mentioned, I think previously, every year on February 14th, Valentine's Day, this is now, we're coming up to our 20th year. We started World Sound Healing Day, where people throughout the planet gather in groups, and throughout the day, wherever they may be, they sound forth with the intention of sending healing energy to our planet, to Mother Earth. And planetary healing is so important right now. And of course, we do that, and we hope you guys will join us this coming February. We do that every year on a day, each, February 14th.
Valentine's Day.
But every single day, we need to send out healing to our beloved Gaia, to Mother Earth. And, we have a beautiful affirmation, or,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And we say, we heal ourselves and we heal the planet. We heal the planet and we heal ourselves. So with that intention every day of working with healing within ourselves and sending that out to Mother Earth.
And so with World Sound Healing Day, we used to just work with the ah sound, because it's a wonderful, if you like, so many of the different centers, the heart center particularly, where it would be manifested and resonated with the ah sound. It's the name of all these different god and goddess names: Tara, Buddha, Krishna, Yeshua, Yahweh, whatnot, the ah. And we did that as just one, and we would get into a state of coherence, visualize the planet, and just project healing energy to the planet. But at the same time, now we've actually opened it up where people can, whether you're banging on a drum, you're humming, playing your guitar, whatnot, as long as you do it, the intention of encoding love onto our planet, it's a good sound. And, since on a quantum level, the time and space are illusions of the lower mind, you can do it any time during that day. We always try to get to like 12 o'clock New York time, but that becomes very New York-centric or whatnot. So it's like trying to really broaden it so it's global, because we have tens of thousands of people taking part in this thing. And it's real. And, and we're so grateful now. There are all these different global meditations, global ohms, and global whatnot happening. What blessing. Perhaps we can indeed create some really positive shift and change, because it would be useful at this point.
And Jonathan, I'm being reminded of the great term that you coined, global harmonization. And I just love that term, because it really speaks to, sending out our sounds to the globe, to the planet. Yeah.
Indeed, we heal the planet, we heal ourselves. So it's, so what a great question. Thank you for letting us talk. And listen, if people want to go to that website, we haven't revamped it yet, because it's not yet time for the 20th, but it will be. It's worldsoundhealingday.org. And
because it's our 20th year, every year, more and more and more and more people throughout the world gather in their specific groups. We always did a group here in Boulder, and people throughout the planet. And of course, last year with the pandemic, everything was online. And what we found was that even more people joined us, because there was a greater reach. So, we'll be doing that again, in 2022.
Hundreds of different countries.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's, on a level, it's so cool that this is manifested from a real grassroots level of it's not being funded by any major companies. People are just getting it. And go, yeah, I can make a difference. All right.
I like that. We should connect up around that time too, and we can create something around that on our end as well.
Yes, please send us your content. We'll be more than happy to share it on all of our platforms as well.
Yeah, we could even do another chat coming around that time to get it out and get people involved in it. I think that'd be great.
Thank you. That would be fabulous. Thank you.
One thing I'd love people to just get a little bit more info around as we're winding down here, specifically around intent, because how do you really juice up intent a little bit more? It reminds me, we were in Bali years back, and we were made friends with this fellow that we had connected with, that was basically our taxi driver, and he drove us around everywhere, and we got to know him and really well. And we'd sit down and have lunch together, and he would do his sort of thanks and his prayer. They always do their prayer before eating anything. And he said, it always curious to me. He goes, in Bali, he goes, we pray to say thank you. He goes, it seems like in North America, you pray when something's wrong. And
you pray when you want something.
You pray when something's wrong or when you want something. And I thought there's a lot of truth around that in a lot of ways. And it made me think, when a lot of times I think what can get mixed up is sometimes, especially if we want something's not going well in our life and we're wanting to move into a a different place within our lives, whether it's in our own life or relationship, whatever it might be, it's sometimes the what I find is sometimes the thought of what we want, but it's connected to the feeling of what we don't want. And it kind of creates this discourse a little bit. So from your perspective, when you guys have been working with intent, what do you find needs to kind of be in place for it to really be effective and helpful?
Well, I'd just like to suggest that for myself, an attached outcome is not very effective, because oftentimes, oh, I want this, and then you get the need, and you get it. Just, I like to do, let me be of greatest service. Let this thing bring in the greatest light, this, whatever it is, and then just release it for myself, putting the intention in that it be filled with light and love, and encoding it, but not having the attached outcome for myself, at least. That is not the type of magic that I want to do, because that, I want to be working not for a manipulating of anything, but just for letting things be in the highest flow of the natural order. Andi?
Well, I think that working with intention, I know that, we sort of visualize that the sound is that carrier wave of in our intention. And it's really setting the tone, if you will, when you're wanting. I always go into surrender, trust, and gratitude. And, I begin breathing and holding, those aspects, those qualities, and then, putting forth the sound. But I think that it's just really, really important to hold those thoughts of gratitude and appreciation, and like Jonathan was just saying, not being locked into an outcome, because oftentimes the outcome that Spirit may have for us is very much more broad than what we can even come up with. And so letting go and letting the sound just carry, those thoughts of gratitude, surrender, trust. It's kind of a broad way to say it, because people will have specific issues that they're working with. But even so, holding those thoughts can enhance then that intention.
What was it St. Francis said? Lord, make me an instrument.
And that's one of the things that we teach, is that the sound, we are instruments. We are
Conduits.
We are conduits. The sound is coming through us, not from us.
Yeah, well said.
Mhm.
I know
That's
that was the exact one that was coming through for you many times.
Mhm.
Just I'm an instrument, and then just
use me as an instrument.
Yeah.
And what you said about attachment, I think that's really, really profound too. And when we interviewed another speaker for this series, RJ Spina, who essentially healed himself from chest down paralysis, it was a really remarkable story. And that was a big part, he said, to the zero attachment to the outcome. And that's really what opens up the magic, because like you said, if you have an attachment, then you start to get stuck, you're constricting the possibilities again. When you have no attachment, I mean, I know personally from our experience, it's like when we have very little attachment and like no attachment to something, it shows up in ways we never would have been able to predict anyways.
And
That's
oftentimes much better.
and much better than we could have actually figured out with our linear mind. And one other part with that I know helps for me with intent is I need to feel it in my body. So I think Joe Dispenza talked once about thoughts are kind of the electric part of the field and feelings are more the magnetic part of the field. Together, the thoughts and the feelings create that electromagnetic field that exerts off the heart and the rest of the body and interacts with the field around us. So for me, whatever I can conjure up that makes that, wells me up usually. And it's still pretty easy right now because we've got little kids. So, they're still really cute. And so it's pretty easy to kind of tap into something that wells me up pretty quick. Maybe a little bit harder when they get into being teenagers, but then you go to the family pets.
Yeah.
But but family pets are a really good place to start because there's a real unconditional love with family pets. So sometimes just connecting to something real, tangible that lets you feel something in the body. To me, that's the resonance of that emotion or that feeling.
Definitely.
And I want to suggest it's possible with our kids, they can be 30, 40, and you can still feel that unconditional love. It is possible.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So,
Our
you know,
son is at 33.
I love it. That gives us all hope. So, just joking with the parents out there. But it's like if you I really do feel like parenting is one of those things where I remember giving advice to some of my patients about parenting before I was a parent, and actually had to phone them and apologize once I became a parent. Saying now I actually really do get it, and
so
I
sorry.
apologize for how simplistically I tried to make that for you. But guys, what an absolute pleasure to have you guys on the show.
And I did want to mention something before we
go ahead.
we close off. So when we were starting to dive into your book, The Humming Effect, I came across the foreword, the
this was beautiful.
dedication, and I just wanted to share it with the audience because it's so beautiful. And it's probably no accident that we're in this shift in humanity, shift in consciousness, as has been prophesied by the ancients. And here we are now, and our poster for this particular series, Energy, Frequency, and Magnetics, is cocooned or held together or nurtured or guided by the four corners of these four beautiful couples, that one of them being you here. And the dedication that you wrote in this book gets me choked up just knowing that I'm going to read this. We dedicate this book to each other. It has been a work of deep love, respect, and joy, and we could not have done it without each other. With sincere gratitude and appreciation, we humbly honor the extraordinary relationship we have been blessed with, and which allows this book to manifest. The beautiful union of masculine and feminine coming together at this time in beautiful balance and harmony is so beautifully exemplified by who you are. So thank you so much for your presence and for the great sharing that you're doing, and the powerful sharings that you're bringing forth through humming, which is accessible to everyone, everywhere, at all time.
Wow. You know what, that has so touched our hearts. I know both of us, even got a little teary hearing that. And it's just, thank you for sharing that. And as you guys also are doing this incredible work as a couple, we are just delighted that we have found each other.
Right,
so
to be able to share with,
so thank you very much, both of you. It's just been a joy to be here today together.
It's very much been like connecting with old friends, with everybody that we've been able to talk to so far for this series. I feel like it's a really special series at a very special time. So
please tell us where people can find you and dive more into your work that you're offering at this time.
Well, we want to invite everyone to come to www, of course, Healing Sounds, that's sounds with an S at the end, healingsounds.com. It's a wondrous, award-winning website that's got everything from information, tools, a lot of freebie downloads for people, because our purpose is basically to empower and shift and change planetary awareness, consciousness, and healing. And so we're there to serve. And it's a really good place to get lost for a while, the Healing Sounds website.
healingsounds.com. And just thank you again for this beautiful time together. And just, we want to send blessings of love and light through sound to both of you and to all of our listeners. And Gosh, what a joy, what a blessing this has been.
Nice. So thank you. And if we were in person, we'd go, hey, let's do an Om together. But because of the, shall we say, challenges right now of Zoom and other media, we'll just silently send the energy out to everyone.
Mm.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
guys.